like some violent terrorist entity that deserves by any means necessary, right?
I was kind of wondering recently. I feel like a lot of, if I was going to summarize like the whole argument that happened between you and him, I feel like if you had to put a debate topic down to it, I feel like it would just be a question of, can you support Palestinians without supporting groups that target civilians? I feel like, to me, that based on what you guys say to each other, it seemed like you agreed on everything that was happening in Gaza just like within 2 seconds. And then it was all just about Hezbollah, the Houthis, about Hamas, about Jewish history. To me, like that's the essence of it. Is like, can you support Palestinians?
Basically relinquished control over Creator Clash 3, a boxing charity
Do I hit him
match
with one of these?
that they had put together, third year.
I heard you guys had to relinquish control. Fucking got him, dude. We got him, bro.
Row after Ethan got Lena to drop out. She was supposed to fight.
What an insane fucking thing to say with zero evidence. Ian knows that I didn't force Lena to drop out. We've explained what happened in detail, okay? You all fucking forced her to drop out. Give me a break, dude. She would be fighting if you didn't drop that. If you dropped that video after the event, she would be fighting in it. No question about it. No question. And that's kind of your fault, don't you think?
Lena is one of the employees at H3H3 Productions. And also another fighter, Harley, also dropped out because he was upset and offended that Ian and iDubbbz had dared to criticize Ethan.
So again, what a psychotic loser he is. Harley is Jewish, and he, like me, takes offense to the way that they trivialize anti-Semitism and accuse me of hallucinating. Right? He took cross with that.
They were obviously Jewish.
That's why he quit. You had another Jewish fighter quit your fight because he didn't trust you guys. He didn't like what you guys were doing. Does that not give you pause? A minority, a Jewish person quit. You can let Loner in.
I wanted
Damn you, Jews.
There he is. Hello, LonerBox.
Wake up, Ethan. Hello.
Ah! Nice to see you. How are you?
I'm very well. How are you?
I'm good. What time is it there? You're in Scotland, right?
Yeah, it's 9 o'clock here.
9 o'clock. Okay, good. It's not too late. I don't know how much you watched of Hassan's mega reaction. I pulled a few clips and a lot of the historical stuff I'd love to talk to you about as well.
What, the 8-hour reaction to 20 minutes of content?
Yeah, exactly.
No, I did not see that. No.
Yeah, I don't blame you. Most people don't have time for that shit. But I'll pull up some of the clips. Actually, this first clip I want to watch is comes from TikTok. A really interesting message from a PhD candidate here. She's on TikTok as Nope Brigade 0. And she brings up this issue of leftists who are anti-intellectuals. And she kind of pegs Hassan. Let's take a look.
The difference between neoliberalism and fascism, if it's all just bad. Another thing that's happening here is sort of reverse ethnocentrism. Ethnocentrism is this fallacy where people think that their culture and their country and their way of life is the best and the most supreme. And we all do this to a certain extent. But on the left, it's a reactionary, America's the worst country on the planet. Nobody's ever been worse than this country. It shows me that you are deeply uncurious about the history of the world and any other country. Tell me without telling me that you've never heard of France, Spain, or Great Britain. We've been living in a multicultural democracy, a flawed one, but still it existed for the last 40 years. And we are returning to earlier iterations where democracy was much reduced to the population. But if you say this is as bad, it's always been this bad, and all these groups have always suffered in the same way, then you don't see the nuances in our history and how things have been better, and they're getting worse now, but it doesn't mean that they can't improve through efforts like a renewed civil rights movement, okay? And that just like allows you to sit back and just be a critic without actually building anything. And
Right.
this masquerades as critique when reality it's just anti-intellectualism.
Yes.
It's just reactivity. It's just as dogmatic as what's happening on the right. It's fucking dangerous. And if you are serious about wanting things to change, you need to understand them. You cannot fix a problem until you understand the problem. So yes, neoliberalism is not fascism. It is quite bad for a lot of people. And I'm not okay with what Joe Biden did with Palestine either, man. But like, let's get real about solving the problems, okay? And anti-intellectualism is a problem on the left. We do not have time for this anymore.
Listen, I thought that was fantastically. This is something you don't hear people saying, and she articulated it really well. When I hear someone like Hassan talk about America, for example, like it's the evilest country that ever existed. It can't be saved. It can't be changed. It needs to be overthrown. Israel's the Zionism or not Zionism, but Israel's history. There's no victims in Israel. The Israelis cannot be victims ever for any reason. It's like there's zero nuance in this conversation. It's what drives me insane. And it's kind of been my whole problem with this. I'm just trying to have an honest conversation, and they lose their fucking mind and call me a Zionist. Your thoughts, Loner?
That's all correct. I got nothing else.
Thank
Well, my voice is echoing in your end. Is there a way to bring that down?
Yes. Yes.
One,
Thank
two,
you.
1, 2.
There you go, you guys.
Okay. Yeah. No, I was gonna say it's still echoing. Oh fuck.
We'll fix
My
it.
head's
Don't
gonna
worry.
explode. Okay,
Let's-
I'll just pretend. I'll do my best.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, the first time I thought of this term was I observed it during the Ukraine and Russia war, because it just seemed that regardless of how black and white Russia's imperialist desires were, and how often people like Putin and Lavrov and all these people in the Kremlin would keep saying, what we want to do is we want to claim Ukraine because we don't think it's a real country. We think it's a part of the Russian Empire or the former Soviet Union. We think like Ukrainian culture is really just like the little brother of Russian culture. They would say this constantly, but people in the West would still just desperately snatch for whatever excuse they could to blame it on NATO or on the West. And the thing I kind of described that was like left-wing American exceptionalism. Like even in a case where you've got a former empire of 300 years, basically, like whether it was through the Russian Empire or the Soviet Union or the intervention of Russia in Eastern Europe and the former Soviet Union after that, people still had to find a way to make it actually the fault of the United States. I just thought that was like really bizarre. And to me, it's just American exceptionalism, but just turned on its head. It's rather than America
totally.
being exceptionally good, it's America is exceptionally bad. And definitely with the Middle East, you see the same thing, right? Like it's funny that people always like on the far left of things always use terms like Orientalism to describe their critics, but they actually seem to be like the ultimate Orientalists in so many ways, because they so often treat Arabs and Arab leaders or people in the Muslim world as if they just have absolutely no agency and no free will of their own. So when we talk about Iran and the regime and why it is the way it is and why it's so destructive in the region, everyone always says, oh, it's just because of the American coup in 1952. And it's like, America has like bombed entire countries to hell and back, even since like in the 70s, and now those countries get along with the United States. Like America nuked Japan, and America and Japan are friends, but for some reason we have to only expect the worst of Iran because of America getting too involved in their policy from like the 50s to the 70s, which doesn't really make any sense to me. And it is just like, to me, it's just like a very thought terminating cliche that people like to use to avoid
That's
that
it.
nuance.
It's thought terminating. That's like the approach to all these conversations. And like, I don't know if you saw during our debate, one of the things, probably the most disgusting and disturbing part of that whole conversation was the way that he basically erased all of Jewish history in the Middle East. And he says the majority of people moved there because of Zionism, because they wanted to be in Israel, which is just fucking insane, by the way. And it's so gross. And Hassan, he surrounds himself with all these like, well, who's this historian he was talking with? He's a historian, quote unquote. They always harp on like the bombings in Baghdad caused all the Jews to flee. And there's just no intellectual rigor. There's no thought for nuance or trying to figure it out. I don't know, man. It's really sick. And it's anti-Semitic, frankly. If you're being like, the Jews of the Middle East were not forced out of their homes by anti-Semitism. They went to Israel because of Zionism. That is the most anti-Semitic thing I can pretty much imagine you saying. It's just horrific. And they have no problem saying that.
Is the historian you're thinking of Zachary Foster by any chance?
Let me Google his name and I'll see. Zachary Foster. Yes, this guy is such a fucking clown, dude. Holy shit.
It doesn't
This guy doesn't know anything, and he sits there like as this, and that's what Hassan does. He brings these charlatans out, and by the way, also Jewish. He wears his Jewish friends like a human shield. He's managed to collect every anti-Zionist Jew in the world.
Yeah, that take about the
surround
bombings,
himself with
it's
them.
like the first time I ever heard it, like I would have thought, and I'm not like a history graduate, but the first thing I would have thought just instinctively was like, okay, so you're telling me that 90+% of these people who have lived in this country for like, some of them for over 1,000 years, like this is their ancestral homeland. And you're telling me that they all within 1 year upped and left because of a handful of grenade attacks that killed like 4 people. When in history has this ever happened? Have you managed to convince like 90% of a population to
They've been
leave
there for
within
2,000
a year
years
because of like a couple of attacks? And obviously it
And by the way,
completely excludes everything that happened before then. Yeah, mental.
And again, the historian that brings that entire dialogue forward, Avi Schleim, says the first 2 bombings were done by anti-Semitic terrorists who after the first 2, the vast majority had already signed up to leave. So it's just, there's no rigor to understand what's going on. Here's Hassan. Let me pull up some of the clips here. Let's take a look.
You don't run your own country. A
Hassan has a denims moment, which runs in the family, I guess.
foreign country named Israel runs your country.
Have you ever found? Wow. And then he puts this clip in here where he comes up to me to try to take a photo with me. Wow. Wow. Remember when he fucking had to admit that this person, I didn't know who the fuck he was, and then he was some dumbass clout chaser? Is there actually a video of me saying that Israel or Jews run America? Is there actually a video of me saying that? No, there isn't. He's saying that like Arabs that wanted to collaborate with America basically said, no, you don't understand. It's actually the Israeli lobby that dominates. It's actually the Jews that dominate America. I mean, I also don't disagree with what he's saying. I often will talk about obviously AIPAC and the Zionist lobby.
Now, if you don't know the context, he's defending Hassan Nasrallah. He's like, actually, Hassan Nasrallah, do we have that where he says I'm more anti-Semitic than Hassan Nasrallah? And so he's defending him. And he's actually being like, he's not anti-Semitic at all. It's the Jews that run America. So,
what the Nasrallah quote when he's saying that it's not Israel that controls America, it's America that controls Israel? That one.
Yeah, yeah, I think so.
Yeah, because people like Hassan would say that that's an example of Nasrallah fighting anti-Semitism, because you would normally expect people to say it's the other way around, like it's the Zionist occupied government, but Nasrallah would say no, it's the other way around. It's that Israel is basically like America's little helper. But I think people don't understand why Nasrallah says that. With Nasrallah and the Axis of Resistance, they have this term where they describe America as the great Satan and Israel as the little Satan. The reason that, and they'll tell you this as well, the reason that they say that America is the one that calls the shots and Israel is just like a kind of like a little henchman is, it's not because they're fighting anti-Semitism. It's because the ultimate worst thing ever for these movements is to get defeated by the Jews without any excuse. So Nasrallah and these people will say that the only reason that Israel has ever managed to achieve a victory over an Arab or Muslim nation is because America helped them, which obviously wasn't true in the 48 war, at least. They didn't get help from anyone really at that point. But then that's what they'll say.
Hassan would
America
disagree
is the
with you,
excuse.
actually.
Yeah.
Here, to be specific, this is one of the most insane things in the video. And like, how do you even say this with a fucking straight face? It's putrid. It's actually insane. This is like saying the Klansmen were actually less racist than you, black person who's trying to defend your people. I mean, I don't need to use other races as examples, but it's hard to explain just how fucking malicious this is. Listen to this shit. Talking about Hassan Nasrallah, who said, I hope all the Jews, is this one that's contested? I hope all the Jews gather in Israel so that we don't have to bother to hunt them all down.
You asking me about that quote?
Yeah.
So that quote is contested. There is a speech that he gave, I think at some point in the 2000s, where it doesn't actually appear in the final published text, because it came from I think it was like a Hezbollah affiliated newspaper.
Yeah, we'll cut that too.
There was a person who was at the speech who wrote it in a newspaper of his own and claimed that he had heard it there. But then there was a whole like a contest with the editor and everything. There is a gap in the speech though, where it looks like it could easily have gone. That said, there are Nasrallah speeches that no one contests, like the one where he said that there will never be anyone more cowardly, weak, and frail in spirit, mind, ideology, and religion than the Jew. And I'm not saying the Israeli. That quote is on.
Yeah, that's my favorite. Yeah. He goes. Let me be clear. I'm not talking about Israelis. I'm talking about Jewish people. He went out of his way to clarify that.
Do you know about his where their real land is? Do you know that one from Nasrallah?
So read it.
So this is just before the Second Intifada, when he is basically trying to gas up the Palestinian militant groups to go and take action. Like he even uses the word Intifada, and he says, "The real land." He said, he said their real land is Ethiopia as far as the Falasha are concerned, and Russia as far as the Russian emigres are concerned. And there will be a time when these people will really feel nostalgia for their original homeland. He said that a few times, like let the Falasha go back to Ethiopia, let the Russian Jews go back to Russia. The choice is yours and the example is clear before your eyes. Israel has nuclear weapons and the strongest air force, but is still weaker than a spider web. He said this like right up to the Second Intifada. His whole thing was you need to terrorize them until they get sick of trying to live here and go back to where they came from. Like literally go back to Russia, go back to Ethiopia.
And again, which is so fucking insane. I've heard even Hassan parroting that, saying, "Do you want the idea is to make it so bad that they are going to leave? Leave to go where? Leave to go where? I don't know what the fuck they're talking about. He thinks that Iraqi Jews are going to move back to Iraq. Like he actually thinks that. He really thinks that the Iraqi Jews should move back there and start a new life.
Well,
by the way, are they allowed to do that?
So kind of, but not really. So Iraq has a return law for descendants of Iraqis who lost their citizenship because they left. The return law specifically excludes Jews.
That's an important detail.
In 1975, they did institute a decree that meant that they could go back to Iraq through a different process. The only problem is that in the wording of it, they actually bought an ad in the New York Times to advertise this. They said that you can come back. We have no problem with Jews unless they're Zionists. And there's a reason that
they're coming from Israel.
Yeah, there's a reason that a lot of Jews were not very convinced by this, because this was about 6 years after the same party, the Ba'ath Party, executed a dozen or so Iraqi Jews by accusing them of being Zionist spies under a political party kangaroo court. They tried them for 3 days and then hanged them on very, very
it's not helping,
charges.
It's not helping the anti-Semitism claims. They're not beating those.
Not at all. A few Jews did go back though, a very small handful. I think in the late 70s there were about 500 Jews living in Iraq, and by the late 90s that number had gone down to about 30. So
it didn't work out for half of them almost. Here's direct quotes from Nasrallah before I play this clip for you and show you what a disgusting monster, racist, Jew-hating monster Hassan is. The 50th, what is that? 50th anniversary? 50th? 50th? Is that how it's spelled? Am I having a brain aneurysm? 50th? 50. Okay. I'm not moving on, Dan. I need to understand what's happening. 50th anniversary of the historic catastrophe and tragic event, namely the establishment of the state of the Zionist Jew, the descendant of apes and pigs, on the land of Palestine and the holiest of our places. These are uncontested. This is in the book of quotes that this guy from Kneecap was reading, that Hassan quote tweeted about how cool these guys are. He also went out on stage with them in what's it called, that music festival, Coachella. Commenting on normalization, he says this: despite all these Jewish ambitions, we are in this nation say that the dreams of the Israelis have come to an end. We promise and warn them that their dreams are over and that the time has come for them to wake from their dreams and face reality. A reality in which people refuse to live in humiliation and view life with the Zionist Jew as nonsense. A reality in which every man, young and old, loves to blow himself up to tear apart the bodies of invading, occupying Jews. The fuck? This message of the incident, this is the one you were saying. But if we search the entire globe for a more cowardly, lowly, weak, and frail individual in his spirit, mind, ideology, and religion, we will never find anyone like the Jew. And I am not saying the Israeli. We have to know the enemy we are fighting. And so these are uncontested ones. So even if he didn't say we want all the Jews to move to Israel so that we don't have to be bothered to hunt them down worldwide, you still have a nice little sample size there to pick from. So here's what Hassan said about Hassan Nasrallah, the owner of all those insane quotes.
The actual fucking video that I was watching from Hassan Nasrallah. Here, I'll just show you the full video instead of my reaction to the video. Ironically enough, Hassan Nasrallah less anti-Semitic than Ethan Klein. I cannot stress this enough. Hassan Nasrallah is less anti-Semitic than Ethan Klein. Ethan Klein constantly makes a conflation.
The fact that you can even go out and say something like that without any pushback, any problem, is just, it's just open and out anti-Semitism. It's disgusting. I mean, this man is a fucking bad person. He's just a bad person. He's dishonest. He's not even curious to find out what actually happened. He just... You know, I didn't know about his dad was the founder of some, like, conservative party that was, like, friends with Hamas. They, like, negotiated Sinwar's release.
I've heard about that. I haven't looked into it.
Yeah, I have looked into it. That is true. His dad founded the party that helped negotiate the release of Sinwar. So maybe his perspective on Jewish, I would say, isn't exactly unbiased, or on Israel is unbiased.
Between Zionism and Judaism, Hassan Nasrallah, on the other hand, does not. The clip that I was watching about Hassan Nasrallah, who is homophobic and definitely has some questionable perspectives, okay? Here he is talking about, well, yeah, he's dead now. But let's hear what the General Secretary Hezbollah had to say.
Anyway, he's doing a quote, but his claim is that Hassan Nasrallah is not anti-Semitic. In fact, he's less anti-Semitic than I am. And of course, Hassan is the person to determine who is and isn't, and what is and isn't anti-Semitic. I find it really funny. Throughout the whole thing, he keeps going, anti-Semitism is on the rise, guys. It's on the rise. It's up like 60%, and it's a huge problem. Not me, though. I have nothing to do with that.
I don't know.
Okay.
I feel like after watching that, especially after watching the debate, because I did watch all of that, it took like 10 hours, but
Sorry about that.
I think after watching that, I kind of just reached what you might call like peak Hassan, because, you know, every now and then with Trump, this used to happen where Trump would get caught saying or doing something mental, usually in like 2015, 16. And the Democrats always did this like, yes, we got him. That's it. He's done. He's never coming back from this pickle. And then he comes back from it and he's totally fine. I feel like that generally happens with Hassan as well. And honestly, like, given that as a seasoned political veteran, you know, going in one debate and he ends up coming out with like those absurd takes, like standards for how we need to determine sexual violence on October 7th, or the constant equivalence of the Warsaw Ghetto and the with the Houthis, or go back to Iraq. Everyone knows that, like, go back to Poland, for example, is a trope.
That's what I
well,
said.
how's
And he
go
goes,
back to
oh,
Iraq
really?
now? Yeah, I'm just like,
Yeah.
I think once you reach that point, it's just like, yeah, you've kind of got everything you need in terms of like making the point hammer home. And if that doesn't work on people, then nothing will, you know?
It just, it's very sad to me that Hassan is paraded around Twitch homepage and interviewed by the New York Times. And he's like, no, I'm racist. I hate Jewish people for sure. And he's not treated like Nick Fuentes, who's on Kick. He's not treated like, any number of disgusting anti-Semitic fucking weirdos, which he is. He's one of them. Here is, let's see. This is not very historical, but I just like to show this because Hassan says his community has nothing to do with harassing us. CPS a lot of the people were making CPS jokes who were donating. CPS Officer Miller, Ethan Klein's a terrorist, Shredder's Cheddar Fund, Klein Family Giardia, Hitler Klein, Content Protective Services, H3 Snark, Ethan sexually harassed C-Man. That's a deep cut. Then also, on top of all this, was great, he got passed an article. One of his helpers was named CPS Chris. That's one of his inside people who was putting documents together. And they passed him a link. It's on, I have a picture of it. And he's working with somebody named CPS Chris. Which, again, pretty disgusting, pretty heinous. And for him to even say my community has nothing to do with that, he knows that. He's working with CPS Chris. So shout out CPS Chris. We see you. We hear you. And we love you for that, don't we, folks?
Could have been done in good faith jest, you know?
Yeah, it could have been. The Raider of Ramallah, which is what they call Ela now. And yeah, lots of fun stuff there. And this was like only 30 minutes into the to this stream. Here is here's what he had to say. I don't know why they keep doing this. It's so insane. Everybody's trying to relitigate. First of all, he's quoting this Z Squirrel person who is. What kind of credibility we have here with Z Squirrel, do you think?
Have you not seen Z Squirrel's tweet with the where she literally cropped out a piece of a UN report to make it look like there was no sexual violence on October 7th?
I don't recall. I know she's insane. Like just a straight up.
If you haven't seen this, this is about as strong as it gets for using this.
And so
as a source.
this is one of Hassan's primary sources that he constantly pulls from, including in his reaction. LonerBox sent us a link. Here it is. Thank you so much. So here's her tweet. That's still up, I guess. Breaking: the UN just released its first actual investigation into October 7th and ongoing Gaza genocide by Israel. It concludes that there was violence against women. It concludes that though there was violence against women, there was no proof of any rape, let alone mass rapes, or that it was ordered by Hamas. It's over, they said. And so what are we missing here? Was there actually something that she removed here?
Yep, I'll send you a screenshot of that 95. You can obviously, you see it looks like it's cropped, right? Like you can see that little artifact in the bottom left in the space. So there's the screenshot of the whole paragraph.
So let's see the part that she cut out. Let's see. Dan will send that. And just remember, this is Hassan's primary source for what happened on October 7th. Here's what so let's see here, just for comparison. Okay. So 95. The commission identified patterns indicative of sexual violence in several locations and concludes that Israeli women were disproportionately subjected to these crimes. The attacks on the 7th of October enabled perpetrators to commit SGBV. I don't know what that is.
I think it's like sexual and gender-based violence.
Okay. And this violence was not isolated, but perpetrated in similar ways in several locations by many Palestinian perpetrators. The commission did not find credible evidence, however, that the militants received orders to commit sexual violence, and so it was unable to make a conclusion on this issue. However, inflammatory language and disbelief around sexual violence observed with both parties risks silencing and discrediting survivors, further exacerbates trauma and stigmatization. That's very interesting.
So for whatever reason, she didn't want people to see that there was a pattern of sexual violence across multiple locations by multiple perpetrators. For some reason, that part's not interesting to the claim.
So she cut that entire paragraph down to, the commission did not find credible evidence, however, that militants received orders to commit sexual violence and so was unable to make a conclusion on this issue. Which, by the way, how are you going to... It's not exactly easy to find evidence for that. But regardless, even in the part that she erased, it says, we don't question the victims because it just makes things worse. She cut that part out too, while calling them all liars. It's unreal, man. It's heinous.
Like if you were a journalist for doing like that kind of obvious level of cropping to put it in a screenshot, like you'd just be fired. It's like, it's just open and shut. People are usually not that on the nose. She's
lauded. Yeah. And because of people like Hassan, they still raised this person up as being some kind of credible reporter. And there's this whole fucking cloak of, there's a whole like network of these people that lift each other up, that cite each other, and they're all in on this insane cover-up, in my opinion, of any type of Israeli victimhood, to make it seem like there's never been a time in history where the Israelis have been victims. They've only ever been perpetrators. They're perfect evil. You know what I mean? So anyway, here's this. Here's him talking about, yeah.
Sure. Also, the person that conducted the fucking UN report admitted that it was a mischaracterization that genital mutilation took place. Fuck. The reason why this is important, by the way, stop debating rape and focus on the genocide, good Lord. No, shut the fuck up. You want to know why this
I love that.
Important?
No, I will continue to debate rape. I don't deny rapes, by the way.
That is actually quite.
I just question if they happened. So he says, thanks to D Squirrel, his reputable source there, that the UN report, it's so crazy how they keep pointing to this, and it just completely contradicts everything they say. But they're so persuasive, so insistent. I mean, it really... What was it Goebbels said about the lies?
I don't know. Tell them lots.
The more that you say it, let's see. He had something, I don't remember who he was. I don't remember what he did exactly, but Goebbels quote about lies. I just remember his name. If you tell a lie big enough and keep repeating it, people will eventually come to believe it. I wonder if they read that.
Yeah, I did have a comment on that with the debate as well, because I feel like there was a kind of like a misunderstanding of what circumstantial evidence versus direct evidence actually means. So the problem is that circumstantial evidence is sometimes better than what people call like direct evidence. So for example, direct evidence is like a witness statement. If a witness says that they saw something firsthand and describes it, that's what you call direct evidence. And the problem there is that witness statements can sometimes be wrong. Circumstantial evidence, it's interesting that Hassan was really obsessed with like forensics and that idea, to the point of saying like, suggesting that there needs to be a third party after the bodies have been buried to come in and do forensics, which is like, what, you're going to dig them out and let a third country
There's
come
never
in
a bar enough to
poke
clear
around.
like
Yeah, it's very bizarre.
If the Israelis did the forensic, we don't trust them because Israelis are liars.
Yeah, and they've done that. Yeah, they've said that in the past. Yeah, but the thing with forensics is forensics in sexual violence is still circumstantial evidence. A rape kit is circumstantial. A rape kit will tell you that there is sexual contact and might give you DNA, although that's less likely. But in both cases, especially with the first one, that's still circumstantial, because if they find only that there was sexual contact, well, why doesn't someone just say, well, that might have just been with her and her partner beforehand, right? Or with the kind of stuff that people say, even if it was like if they found the DNA of a Hamas guy, like given what happens online, people might try to infer that people have already invented like romances between Hamas fighters and Israeli captives, so they might even just say it was consensual.
Hassan's one of them, frankly.
Yeah, but the problem is like the thing that's going on there, the technique that's going on there, is a double standard of evidence. So Hassan and I've seen him do this a million times, will talk about the Deir Yassin massacre, like horrible crime by the Israelis, and actually approved by the main army as well. But he'll constantly talk about this incident where a boy was forcibly thrown into an oven by his dad at gunpoint by the Israeli militants. But that story is based on a witness statement, one single witness statement from like 50 years after the fact. Like there's a reason most historians don't put it in their books. It's because generally like witness statements that appear 5 decades later, like they might be true, but also they're generally seen as less reliable because after 50 years, people can invent memories, or people like memories are very unreliable, especially in war. So, but he'll accept that like wholeheartedly, like it just happened, no question, even though most historians don't put it in their work on that massacre, because again, like that's a really sensational story, right? Like imagine like militants forcing someone to throw their kid into an oven, right?
It's just one of the most disturbing things I've ever heard. I've seen the guy telling that story in a documentary.
Yeah. And if you want to believe it, like that's fine. But then that means you accept witness statements that never appeared at the time, but did appear 50 years later from a single person, and only gets used by like very, very hardline, like partisan authors. Like it's not in Ilan Pape's book, which Hassan talks about. It's not in Rashid Khalidi's book. It's not in Benny Morris's books. It's not in any of these like popular historians talking about the 48 War, but that's accepted. If that is accepted, then why wouldn't a witness statement about a rape on October 7th be accepted?
Or what about a first-hand witness? What about a first-hand witness? What is that? Or what about someone who's like, I actually was sexually assaulted? That's not good enough either, apparently.
Yeah, which we have dozens of for October 7th. Like witness statement, generally for sexual violence and conflict, witness statements are all you're ever going to get. That's the same with Sabra Shatila, the massacre that was committed by Lebanese Christians in Beirut with the IDF overseeing it. That was the evidence for pretty much all the sexual violence that took place there was the same thing. It was witnesses and mostly just how the bodies were found afterwards. It's not like there was a forensics team dispatched to swab all the women and everything. That didn't happen, right? The medical teams went there to identify the dead, and still we accept that.
Don't you guys see how fucking insanely hateful what he's doing is? When it comes to Israelis, we need forensic evidence, which apparently I don't even know what that means, because rape kits aren't apparently forensic evidence. I really don't know where. What does he want? Like a fucking video of it happening? Is that the only way he'll be convinced? But when it comes to Israeli victims, the bar is, it's the highest bar to cover. But when it's anyone else, then we don't hold them to that insanely, that disgusting standard that nobody should be held to. You know, it's just it's so repulsive, and it's so out in the open. Here it is. So here's what he said once again about this, and I'll read you an excerpt from this report, and they just continually lie about what's in this report.
Stop debating rape and focus on the admitted that it was a mischaracterization that genital mutilation took place.
Okay. Here's the findings that they did on, this is the direct findings that they found on October 7th. Nova Music Festival, an outdoor event, an open field 5 kilometers from Gaza, perimeter fence, attracted around 3,500 attendees. Mainly young individuals. Information reviewed by the mission team indicates that the festival was a site of grave violations, including brutal mass murder, several hundreds of bodies recovered from the site, in addition to many abductions. Bodies were also found with extensive burn damage. Based on the examination of available information, including credible statements by eyewitnesses, there are reasonable grounds to believe that multiple incidents of rape, including gang rape, occurred in and around the Nova Festival site during the October 7th attack. Credible information was obtained regarding multiple incidents whereby victims were subjected to rape and then killed. There are further accounts of individuals who witnessed at least 2 incidents of rape of corpses of women. Other credible sources at the Nova Music Festival site describe seeing multiple murdered individuals, mostly women, whose bodies were found naked from the waist down, some totally naked, with gunshots in the head and or tied, including their hands bound behind their back and tied to structures such as trees or poles. Now, listen, it goes on, and it's all equally horrific, right? But imagine reading this and then going to the conclusion, or whatever it was she showed, editing it out to make it, to misrepresent their conclusion and make it seem like they're saying that the Israelis are lying. I mean, how fucking sick do you need to be? How absolutely disturbed do you need to be? And this is something Hassan has done continually since October 7th. He continually brings up this exact report to say they lied. This is the proof that they lied. And if you read it, just read the fucking report, you will see what a disgusting, hateful liar he is. What a horrific lie to tell. And for what purpose? It's so gross.
There is also something people like to do with that particular report, because they'll say that, like, people will suggest that we shouldn't really take much from this one because it's just like a 2-week fact-finding mission. The only problem is that when they say they need a full investigation, I think it's worth asking what a full investigation really means, because even if you look in that report, the thing that they expect from a full investigation is like, there are a couple of locations where they didn't get to interview witnesses, and they think maybe if they hang around for longer, they can build connections with some of the potential survivors until they're willing to talk. And a full investigation wouldn't provide you any more. They're not going to dig the bodies out of the ground and start swabbing them, right? They're not going to get access to like loads more videos or pictures that are just hidden for some reason. The only thing an additional investigation would do, and it says so in that report, is that they would maybe get more time to get survivor statements, and also they'd get to review a few more locations. The fact that it's not a full investigation doesn't discount anything that was said there. Like, what they found there was about as much as you'll find for sexual violence in just about any conflict.
Yeah, I mean, yes, exactly. The thing that Hassan says, the talking point on it is like, oh, they used the fact that there was supposed rapes to justify doing a genocide. And as far as I'm concerned, the way that I see it, I don't really see it that way personally. I don't think they need an excuse to do what they're doing. They're already doing. Like, October 7th was already bad enough for them to justify it to themselves, right? They don't need.
Well, like the manufacturing consent argument.
Yeah.
I mean, if you want to go down that road,
the way that I see. The way that I see this, go ahead.
I was just going to say, like, the people who manufactured more consent for like an Israeli operation in Gaza, the way it is like the people who manufactured the most consent was Hamas. They filmed most of their crimes. Like, they filmed themselves dragging bodies mangled through the city, and they killed.
Why would they record it?
Shooting civilians, yeah. And then they send spokesmen to talk to the media to say that they wanted to do it again, and they've held to that. They've never walked back on that aspiration. So it's like, you don't need like an extra level of brutality to justify like to get a cause for war, right? Like, that's already there.
Right. So when I hear someone doing that, all I hear is somebody, for no fucking reason, calling these victims of horrific crimes liars for no reason other than the fact that they're Jewish or Israeli. And this, I mean, both, right? It's disgusting, and I mean, it's just a shame. It really is. He also said, let's see here. He accused Hila of lying about religious Jewish customs to bury bodies quickly. He calls the Jewish custom of trying to bury the bodies quickly as desecrating bodies.
No. Hassan, please respond to it. It's very important. They're going to use it against you. What do you have to say to Hila's reasoning for Israel not letting forensic investigations that due to religious regions they bury the body ASAP? That's a fucking lie, and she's wrong.
What a horrific, vile human being. He's lying about something so fucked, and it gets even worse.
They did actually conduct forensic examination on many of the bodies. They didn't immediately bury them. She's literally wrong. They took the bodies to the Shura base, and they actually did look at the bodies. The issue, however, was that the initial forensic examination was not conducted by real specialists.
By the way, all of this to deny rapes happened. Once again, if you're even wondering why we're going down this road, that's why.
There's a big time frame issue there as well, because for especially for rape kits, I'm pretty sure you've got like 72 hours before those things become like very, very unreliable. Hamas still had fighters in Israel 4 days after October 7th. So this isn't even to
Right.
mention the time it takes to gather the bodies and to separate them and identify them, and obviously separate the ones that are charred beyond recognition from the ones that you can do forensics on. And then having most forensic institutions in most countries aren't prepared to have 1,200 bodies coming to them in the space of like 2 days or 3 days. Like that's most countries don't have preparations for that because it doesn't happen. So there's so many logistical issues there. As for burying the dead as soon as possible, that is Jewish custom. It's also Muslim custom as well, by the way. Like they also have lots of burial practices that would make it harder to have doctors poking around in their special areas to look for crimes, which is why when we talk about Palestinians who have been sexually abused by the Israelis, and that's happened all the way since the 48 war, we don't really go by forensic evidence of it. Like it's usually because a witness saw something. It's usually occasionally a soldier will confess to something, but it's usually because witnesses said so or survivors. That's like the main piece of evidence we use.
The truth, yeah. So the Zaka group he's talking about, who basically in the aftermath, the direct aftermath, there's like an emergency response team called Zaka, and it's a very religious organization. So these people are true believers, right, in that sense, and they show up to do like the most fucked up jobs possible. And by the way, that just tells you something, that in Israel this exists. There's a team of people who show up to sites of mass murdered civilians and clean it up. You have got a group in your neighborhood that does that, you know? And so these guys show up to clean up the bodies. And these guys, by the way, are like traumatized for life after what they saw there. But they're true believers. So a lot of these guys are like, we need to get these bodies in the ground immediately. They thought they knew death, but that didn't prepare them from October 7th. Volunteers with Saka, an Israeli group that recovers dead bodies, were among the first to reach the victims of Hamas-led attack. The trauma of what they witnessed may last a lifetime. Yeah, so these guys were trying to save them, you know. It's a religious thing, and they want to get them in the ground as soon as possible. And then there's also even an interesting legal battle that I learned about, where apparently they are holding some bodies. The IDF is holding some bodies, and they're all like mangled and burned and charred, and they don't know exactly. They don't even know if they're Hamas fighters or victims or what. And the Zaka, the religious group, is trying to sue to get the bodies buried. And the IDF wants to do forensics on it, but it's like stuck in a legal battle. So Hassan agrees with the IDF.
Yeah, this was a problem with Zaka as well, because there was a dispute over whether the IDF should have their own unit for gathering the bodies or whether Zaka should, because Zaka are a very problematic organization. Like their old leadership has all kinds of like scandals when it comes to like abuse of, I think, even children as well.
Oh, that's not good.
And they are very self-serving. A lot of them, they're a lot of the exaggerated claims and false stories about October 7th, actually quite a few of them originate from one person in Zaka, from one Zaka volunteer who just went around and lied to everyone about what he saw. You know, again, it's the embellished stories. Like we saw a kid thrown in the oven, or we saw kids thrown in bins, or like these things didn't happen, but people have kind of like latched. And even in Israel, there's a whole dispute with Zaka as well, because a lot of them were very inexperienced, because again, it's a volunteer organization. They were sometimes putting like different body parts of different people into the same bag and mixing them up. They would sometimes take bodies that were already in bags and like take them out of the bag and then put them into a Zaka bag for photo ops. So there is a lot of corruption that's gone on there, because it's a volunteer organization and it's hyper religious, but also people have kind of used that fact to try and smear like every aspect of what people found after the fact. Like the fact is that not every Zaka volunteer is a corrupt individual who wants to like cynically use the dead for their own purposes. Like lots of Zaka volunteers genuinely saw things and said things that are corroborated by other witnesses. So yeah, that's the problem as well. It's like whenever there is a genuine criticism, it has to be used in like the most extreme, like absolutist way possible.
That's it.
Yeah.
That's it, yeah. And I mean, listen, should the IDF be recovering the bodies? Absolutely. You know what I mean? Like they should be, right?
I think
But it
generally
doesn't mean that. It doesn't mean that. Again, this is, remember why we're even talking about this. This is all in service of Hassan denying that rapes happen. This is all in service of him, for some reason, dying on this hill, choosing like this. Even his chatter was like, "Why are you doing this?" And he's like, "No, fuck you. I will question the rapes." Nobody cares, and nobody fucking cares.
Zaka ended up literally wrong. They did actually conduct forensic examination on many of the bodies. They didn't immediately bury them.
Yeah, and what they
She's
find?
literally wrong. They took the bodies to the Shura base, and they actually did look at the bodies. The issue, however, was that the initial forensic examination was not conducted by real specialists.
That doesn't happen anywhere. That's such an
Zaka
insane
ended
standard.
up desecrating the bodies in the process and ruining.
He says they desecrated the bodies, which what he means by desecrating the bodies is basically a regular Jewish burial ceremony. So that's fucking cool too, by the way.
Any sort of on-the-spot kinetic forensic examination from taking place, because you have to look at the way that like bodies are presented to develop an understanding of what happened, like how this person died. They did.
Listen to his standard. It's remarkable. It's remarkable that he's able to do this out in the open and nobody fucking cares. And the New York Times is still willing to be like, this hot dude is fucking in a MAGA body. MAGA body? What does that mean? He goes on to call Hila a terrorist many times throughout the video.
Okay.
It's a funny thing about me. I don't like terrorism, and I don't like terrorists.
Yes, you do. You're married to one, and by your own admission.
That part is like just. You know. They keep doing this. This conflation is insane. Hila's participating in mandatory military service, right? She's not in a combat role, and she's essentially forced to serve, and she's not in a combat role. Not everybody in the IDF's a terrorist. Is there war crimes the IDF does? Definitely. Could you call some of these people terrorists? Yes. Is everybody in the IDF a terrorist by definition? Of course not.
It's a kind of strange thing to say when you have no idea what happened during the raid.
That's another thing. We don't even know what happened. Like, that's, yeah. I don't think she even knows what happened, frankly. But imagine just, dude.
Mission.
And I don't like terrorists.
Yes, you do. You're married to one, and by your own admission. You said. Not me. You said.
Literally said, he asked me, is she a terrorist? And I said no, for the record. The conversation he's recounting.
That post context nuke, though, so.
If they're Jews. So that was one. Let's see, he's got a few really good ones here. Oh, this was a really interesting post. Hassan calling Hila a terrorist could have real-life consequences. I believe Hassan is going to drive one of his fans to violence against the Kleins if he keeps pushing this narrative that Hila's a terrorist. He's doubled down on calling Hila a terrorist on his stream. Didn't have the balls to say that to Ethan's face, though. That's true. That's true. He didn't. I asked, do you think Hila's a terrorist? And he said no. Which also doesn't make sense, considering he thinks all IDF people are terrorists. It's a terrorist organization. He has been pushing snark propaganda openly since the debate. The snark subreddit is one thing, but Hassan's audience is fucking huge with a lot of bitter young men who have been radicalized by Hassan's rhetoric. Repeatedly calling a woman a terrorist like this will dehumanize and demonize her to the point where her fans won't see her as a human being, but a personification of the IDF's cruelty, and they believe violence against her is justified. On this charity stream, you could see just from the donation messages how hateful his community is towards Hila in particular. What Hassan is doing right now will launch a new wave of harassment against Ethan and Hila, and I'm very worried about how it's targeted more towards Hila and Hassan's community. I struggle to believe that Hassan doesn't fully realize what he's doing because he knows how the internet works. He knows the snark pages he's promoting has ruined their lives and how bad the harassment they're already getting from them. You know what's funny is like I already. Even before he started like calling Hila a terrorist, that's kind of already like what he's been leading towards. radicalizing people and dehumanizing.
I mean, if someone who literally supports kidnapping civilians is going to call someone else a terrorist, it's like, how much weight is there behind behind that punch, you know?
You're talking about his Filipino
Yeah.
kidnapping unaffiliated sailors for a year. Is an
Yeah,
act
like
of
if someone supports
deterrence.
that, they call someone else a terrorist. It's like, okay, the pot and the kettle are kind of like just shagging at that point, you know?
Here he's mocking Hila's accent, which
Okay. The most brazen display of terrorism propaganda is basically every other fucking broadcast where Ethan Klein comes on and starts talking about how, Palestinians are there. We want peace, but not really. Okay. Like that's the real brazen display.
again, he's doing this thing where he doesn't actually have anything she specifically said, because she hasn't. She's barely talked about it, right? And I mean, Hila's the first to admit the limit of her knowledge. Like she, that's why she doesn't speak much on it. But for Hassan, he's saying that she's spreading terrorist propaganda because she's always coming on and doing Hespera or something. Which, again, the only thing that they have on Hila is that she like made a head gesture once, and there was another one of her saying. Or no, I think it's the same one. She made a head gesture and said, not really, or something, which was separated by several beats. I mean, this is unacceptable behavior. I mean, in any world, in any community, in any place, this is unacceptable behavior, especially towards a, minority group.
Taking the ship to us in the outside world. Okay? The most brazen display of terrorism propaganda is basically every other fucking broadcast where Ethan Klein comes on and starts talking about how, Palestinians are there. We want peace, but not really. Okay? Like that's the real brazen display of fucking terrorism propaganda is Ethan Klein and Ethan Klein talking about Gaza. Okay?
It's unhinged. It's psychopathic. It's violent. It's hateful. It's a lie. It's vindictive. It's just he's such a hateful, disgusting human being, and I don't know if you can't see that. Well, his audience can't see it because in their mind, and you can see it from looking at the chat. You can see it from the donations. You can see it from the snark page that he's now aligned himself with. That they don't see us as human. We are just fucking like some violent terrorist entity that deserves. By any means necessary, right?
I was kind of wondering recently. I feel like a lot of, if I was going to summarize like the whole argument that happened between you and him, I feel like if you had to put a debate topic down to it, I feel like it would just be a question of, can you support Palestinians without supporting groups that target civilians? I feel like, to me, that based on what you guys say to each other, it seemed like you agreed on everything that was happening in Gaza just like within 2 seconds. And then it was all just about Hezbollah, the Houthis, about Hamas, about Jewish history. To me, like that's the essence of it. Is like, can you support Palestinians without supporting groups like Hezbollah or the Axis that target civilians? Because the thing I've noticed about a lot of these communities that kind of revolve around Hassan is they keep on doing this, like, the human shield defense, where every time someone criticizes them, they somehow manage to find some dead Arab or some like destroyed Palestinian building, and so they can hold it up like a sandbag and say, why are you criticizing me when why are you attacking pro-Palestinian people in the middle of a genocide, like that kind of thing, right? So the way I see it now, though, is that like you and Hassan didn't really talk that much about what's happening in Gaza lately. Like I'm guessing you've mentioned once or twice the protests in Gaza, right? The anti-Hamas ones. So there's a reason that I think a lot of people in the other sphere have not really bothered to talk about that, and it's because I think it kills a lot of that narrative, because the way that these people present people like the Houthis or Hezbollah or Hamas is like they are the lines of defense, like they're the resistance against Israel, even though none of them have really done anything to Israel. All of them, Hezbollah and the Houthis, Iran, etc., they pretty much all of them have killed more Arabs than they've killed Israelis, like easily. The Houthis the only people they're good at fighting are other Yemenis. Hezbollah, the only people they're good at fighting are Syrians, like Syrian Sunnis. Even Hamas, like they did one good pot shot in Israel on October 7th. For the rest of the time, they've been doing a better job at killing their own people who oppose them. They've been doing that now. And I think I don't know if you know much about these anti-Hamas protests in Gaza, but they started with a few hundred people at the end of March. Then it was maybe a couple of thousand because it started to spread from Beit Lahia, which is northeast of Gaza. So it's been kind of like at the front line between the IDF and Hamas for a long time. Then it moves to like places like Jabalia, very, very famous Hamas stronghold, refugee camp. Then it goes to Khan Yunis. Then it goes to Rafah. Like these protests have not stopped. They've been going on all the way through. Even Associated Press now has estimated that the numbers of protesters might be in the thousands or even tens of thousands. They have not stopped. If you look at their messaging, it's quite hard to get reporting on the ground from them because one, Israel doesn't let journalists into Gaza, but two, the journalists who are in Gaza are either just flat out pro-Hamas or like Al Jazeera, which is also pro-Hamas, or they are pressured to not say bad things about Hamas, even if they oppose them quietly. So all it's really been is like people collecting iPhone footage of these protests and these people who are exercising like unhuman like bravery because they know that Hamas will kill them and has tortured people to death for protesting against them. They've kidnapped people and shot them for protesting. They've brought back like decades old security apparatuses to go and clamp down on the protesters. They put curfews in. The protesters are still growing. There's a poll that came out from PSR, very reputable pollster in Israel-Palestine, that asked just yesterday what they thought of the protesters. And almost half of the people in Gaza, 48%, supported them, even though quite a lot of them think that they're like driven by some external influence, like Saudi or something like that, right? That's like almost half of people in Gaza supporting these protesters who are anti-Hamas. And their messaging, you can look at the chants, you can look at the leaders who speak and give little 2-minute speeches. They're all saying like the same kind of lines, like they're saying was it Mishan Allah Hamas bara, like for the love of God Hamas out, or Hia Hamas or Bahia, which means like Hamas are terrorists basically. Or they're saying like they accuse Hamas of dealing in their blood or gambling with their lives or selling them out, and they keep saying we want white flags, not guns. There was a call to release the hostages from these protesters, because I think a lot of people in Gaza are starting to understand that before October 7th the IDF was not acting like they were prepared to go and launch into Gaza for a full ground invasion. There's been no whistleblowers or anything to suggest that they were prepared for anything more than like a small border penetration of 70 people. That's all the IDF had protocol for before October 7th. People who are there are saying things now like, stop firing rockets from our areas, because we know that if you fire a rocket from our town square, the town square is going to get bombed, right? So the same poll also showed the number of people in Gaza who still supports armed resistance is down to 30%. The majority of them support negotiation and peaceful protests. They've realized that Hamas's way of doing things, like armed resistance, is not helping them, because it never really has. It's never like trying to target Israeli civilians or launching rockets. It's never helped them. It's never achieved anything for them. And that's becoming a lot more clear. And it's interesting to see that groundswell is starting to take place in Gaza, and people on the like far left, like self-proclaimed pro-Palestinian people, aren't really talking about it. And I think the problem is that it drives such a massive wedge into everything they've tried to advocate for the last year and a half. Like Hassan tried to say that it was like they're protesting against domestic policy. Like, no, they're not. Listen to their chants. You think they're upset about the fucking tax codes in the middle of a war? No, they're not. They're upset because Hamas is basically treating them like fodder. They went into Israel, they capped 1,200 people, then they ran back into Gaza underneath the tunnels with the hostages and said, yep, you can fight us if you want, but you're going to have to rip through the entire city to get to us. And they knew Israel would say yes, because like if you ask Hamas, Israel's the genocidal Zionist entity. Of course they would. So I think things are about to get a lot worse in Gaza right now. Israel's approved a new offensive that is just basically going to mean they are going to permanently occupy 40% of the strip. The rest of it, they're going to occupy. They say it's not permanent, but they have no vision for what comes next. So it's basically permanent. And the aid situation, it's been like 65 days since an aid truck has gone into Gaza now. Majority of Israelis, even, I think the last poll showed that 69% of them said that they would support a hostage release even if it ends the war. There are like growing majorities on both sides now that want this to end. And yeah, I feel like there are things that people can do to support like either side, like to let the people, Gazan protesters, know that people like in the West actually have their back and realize that there can be something different happening there other than like all the dumb shit that Hamas has tried for the last 20 years. And it would behoove actually someone in the West to let Israeli leftists know that actually the ones who are opposing the war and are opposing the future actions of the IDF now, which seems to be most of them, that they do actually have like people outside of the country who like believe in what they're saying, because you can't pressure Trump to do anything. That ship has sailed. But I think this kind of like, there's a problem with this really like maximalist point of view where people basically think like it's either abolish the Zionist entity, fake country, whatever, or it's Israel's going to genocide and conquer everything, even though there are very large groups on both sides that seem to not really agree with either of this anymore.
Why is this one so invested in like discrediting the protesters? I've heard him say that. I've heard him say that they're not. It was taken out of context. They like most of them are there to protest Israel. You know, like why is he so determined on you know?
Because people
not supporting these people.
Because Hassan and people like him have spent the last year and a half, 2 years, 3 years. They spent a long time insisting that Israel and Zionism is basically the same as the Nazis. Which is funny because he had to go at you for making a false equivalency between Jews fleeing the Middle East and the Nakba, which is, you can argue it's a false equivalency. Like they weren't kicked out in the same way. But comparing Nazis to Israel, if you're saying that, it's either, or zone of interest is apparently going on Israel proper. That doesn't make any sense at all. If you're making these comparisons, you either don't know anything about Nazis and Israel, or you're just you're using Nazis as a way to get under the skin of Jews, right? Like that's what you're doing. Because Israel at least has shown that it is capable of making peace with countries that don't threaten it or don't fight with it, right? Israel and Egypt fought a war in 67, a very bloody one. They fought another bloody war in 73. And then 6 years later, they made peace, right? Israel's made peace with Jordan. Israel, after a long time of fighting with Lebanon, they pulled out. And then after destroying Hezbollah beyond recognition, they pulled basically all the way out of Lebanon as well. Their presence now in Lebanon is like 5 hilltops. They didn't build any settlements there like people said they were going to. The government in Israel is insane. They're very, very right wing. There are at least 2 or 3 people in there who are just outright like genocidal maniacs. But the country is not like the Nazis. And like people comparing things like the Houthis kidnapping sailors to the Warsaw Ghetto uprising. The difference is like the Warsaw Ghetto had about 400,000 people in it. 2.5 years later, 90% of them were dead. And there was no decision that anyone in that ghetto could have made to survive. It wasn't that they were too much of a threat to German security or German sovereignty and they were trying to destroy Germany, right? That wasn't why. It wasn't the heads of the Nazis, but it wasn't actually why they were killed. You know, they some of them, none of them had anything to do with trying to attack Germany. They were disarmed, they were prisoners, and they were killed anyway. A bunch of them died of starvation. The other ones were literally just put in a train and gassed. So the difference is that with Nazis, their victims, there was nothing they could do to escape their fate. There was no amount of politicking or anything that the Jews could do to survive other than run away, or if they wanted to just fight and die to the end. With Gaza, the protesters, they drive a wedge into what people like Hassan are saying is because when they say we want white flags, not arms, it's because they know that Israel didn't have any plans to go and occupy Gaza before October 7th, that they thought Hamas were being pragmatic, that they just wanted to focus on domestic rule, right? They thought Hamas were trying to be like restrained in exchange for Qatari aid money and domestic, like improving the humanitarian situation at home. And then Hamas went and attacked, right? So I think the difference is that if you think Israel is like the Nazis, then you would think, well, you might as well just fight because they're going to do this to you anyway. Even though the protesters seem to understand that if Hamas is gone, then you're not going to see you're not going to see airstrikes all over Gaza if Hamas gives up their arms and says that they'd like someone else to go in. Now, there's still problems with the Israeli government of like letting that happen, but I think that's probably why they don't like what the protesters are saying and why they're ignoring it. It's because if you acknowledge them, then you have to change everything about what you think about Israel.
Yeah, this comparison to Nazism is like, it's so hurtful as a Jewish person. And people throw that around like it's not a direct assault on like Jewish identity. And I mean, Hassan is chief among them. And it's just crazy how it's just completely normalized, you know? Yeah, it's a shame. He's such a piece of shit. The way I see it is Hassan is like, there's protesters, and Hassan is like, no, you guys need to fight till you're all dead. Like over from Los Angeles in his cozy West Hollywood house, you know? Fight till the end, you guys. They're like, we don't want war. We actually want to live in peace. We want this over. He's like, no, you need to fight. It's like, okay.
Well, that's what I mean by the Orientalism, right? Because it's so funny what he said about the Houthis, because I think, you know, when he was saying like, what would you do to stop the genocide from Yemen, right? If you're the poorest country. So that's an admission. Saying that is an admission that they're not really doing anything to help, right? Bankrupting the port of Eilat is not going to stop Israel trying to bomb the organization that tried to destroy their country, right? That's not how that works. All the Houthis can do is make a dent in Israel, right? One of those missiles might actually kill 2 Jews, okay? And they'd probably be civilians. But it's interesting that you would say that, because when he spoke about what should the Houthis do when there's a genocide in their backyard, Israel and Gaza is not in the Houthis' backyard. It's 1,000 miles away. The Houthis' backyard is Yemen. And right now, there are still people who are hungry in Yemen. There's still malnutrition in Yemen. There's still like severe malnutrition in Yemen. There's like really serious hunger issues there. And the Houthis are, so to say that as if like they don't matter, and the Houthis should just instead focus on diverting their resources into their little helicopters and their shitty rockets and going into the sea to kidnap sailors, because inshallah, maybe one of these like missiles will land in a field outside an airport, or maybe like if we kidnap enough people, then another port in Israel will go bankrupt. It's like, so really you're just going to like see the rest of the Arab world as like fodder. Then they don't matter. What the Houthis can do, the answer to that question, what should the Houthis do? The Houthis have the power to take care of their own people. They are in charge of 2/3 of the population in Yemen. They have the ability to stop kidnapping aid workers. The UN literally asked them to do this year. They have the ability to stop stealing aid and divert it equally amongst their population. They have the ability to seek diplomatic relations and normalization. Biden took them off the terror list specifically because that would help distributing aid across Yemen. And then they went and attacked a bunch of ships. The Houthis have the ability to they have the ability to try and use the resources that they have access to alleviate the suffering of their own people. And they would do a much better job of that than they ever will at destroying Israel or like kidnapping sailors and bankrupting ports. Like, it's just LARP. It's just entertainment for Westerners. Like, it's not achieving anything. And I just find that really interesting that it's like the Arabs are only ever viewed through the lens of how do we fuck with Israel, even though all these groups, in order to do that, there's like this correlation almost between fucking your own society and trying to destroy Israel. Because the Yemens, the Houthi-controlled Yemen, like the Houthis fuck their own society. By the way, they do actually engage in practices that would easily be called slavery, right? They kidnap Ethiopian migrants and force them to the front lines, promising them money, and they never give it to them. That's kind of like slavery. They have child soldiers. That's kind of like slavery. Children can't choose, especially if they're under like 14, 15. arrest Yemeni women on trumped up charges of immodesty or like drug taking or prostitution or whatever, and then take those women and pass them around the security officials and force them to commit sexual acts on them, which is a form of slavery, like sexual slavery. They do all these things. And that's not from the Saudi press, by the way. This is from Yemeni lawyers and human rights organizations and from victims themselves. This is all attested to. Like, I'm sorry, if you think Ethiopian migrants are Saudi plants, well, go ahead. But, and this is true with every organization that people support. Hezbollah have done fuck all to damage Israel. They've done a lot to damage Lebanon. They've done a lot to damage Syria. Iran, same thing with their own country. And I think that, I don't know, the sooner this kind of like worldview just dies, the better, because I think it's kind of clear now that they have failed. Hezbollah are not what they used to be. Assad is gone. The Iranians ran away from Yemen because they want to focus on, they're worried about Trump and the threats to their nuclear facilities and everything else. The Houthis have stood down from Trump. So I can't remember what the question was. I'm just saying, like, this whole idea of like trying to destroy Israel through force or even through like BDS and everything, it's always been a lost cause. And that's because people don't understand why Jews arrived there. They didn't arrive there for the same reason that the French went to Algeria or the Dutch and the British went to South Africa. Most Israelis are there because their grandparents are refugees, like because they were fleeing. They were either running away from pogroms or from the Nazis and from the Middle East and North Africa. That's why they're there. And the problem is that you're never going to make them leave. You can get the French to leave Algeria. You're not going to get the Israelis to leave.
There's nowhere
Israel.
for them to go.
Yeah.
I don't even understand the argument.
And
go where?
You're also, and this is maybe the thing that I think Westerners have a bit of a harder time digesting because they're not used to it, but they're also not going to accept living as a minority. It's not because they're racist. I'm sure a lot of them are, but it's because everyone knows what happened to Jews who lived in Muslim majority countries.
So
They
that
were
was
not
the big
safe,
point.
right?
Hassan was calling me a racist piece of shit. Actually, he was calling me a racist piece of shit for just literally reciting the history of Jews fleeing persecution in Arab countries. He thought that was Zionist talking points.
Yeah, and there was a time when the Ottoman Empire had a golden age for Jews and Jewish safety. That's like 1,000 years ago. Dhimmitude was a thing. Like Jews were second-class citizens. They were accepted as a sparse, powerless, like minority. In Fez in Morocco, if they walked past the mosque, they weren't allowed to wear shoes. When one sultan allowed them to wear shoes, people got angry and beat them up for it. So they weren't allowed to. It was very difficult for them to press charges if a Muslim ever committed crimes against them. In Algeria, before the French arrived, there were like 3 massacres of Jews in less than 30 years. So protection wasn't always offered there either. So it's like, that's the thing that I think people struggle with, is that in the last, sorry, the Golden Age wasn't Ottomans. It was, that was an Ottoman rule. Sorry. In the last 100 years, like Jewish people have not been able to be a minority in any Middle Eastern country. Lebanon, Syria, Libya, Morocco, Algeria, none of these countries were able to hold on to their Jewish populations. Even Iran, which somehow holds on to some of them, even their Jewish population is dropping. So if they can't do that, then I just think it's very weird for people to say when they talk about Israeli Jews being a minority in a one state of Palestine, then it's like, well, are you really suggesting that out of all the countries in the last 100 years, that Palestine will be the first one that takes care of their Jewish minority and respects them and gives them equal rights? Like Palestine,
especially
the one group of
after,
people
like,
that has the most of an excuse to be anti-Semitic, right? Like
yeah,
Palestinians are
exactly.
number
I mean,
one.
There's an insane conflict. They've been like they've been on the receiving end of horrific violence for a long time. Yeah, that's kind of my point. Oh, well, that is my point, which is that it's not. In the video, I ask, is it really that crazy to not even be a little bit worried about your safety? And it's not reasonable to look at people and be like, actually, yes, there's a risk that there'll be a lot of violence against you, or maybe you'll be ousted, or maybe you'll become second-class citizens. There's a small chance of that happening. But I think you'll probably be okay. So you should take down your borders and dissolve your government. It's like no nation on earth in the whole history of Earth would ever do that.
Yeah, that's why.
It's just
Well,
it's just illogical.
I mean, like South Africa did it, but then that's because anti-white racism has just never been as much of an issue as anti-Semitism. You'd think a left-winger would know that, right? Like, go figure. Yeah, anti-Semitism is a more valid concern than like the anti-white racism in South Africa. So, yeah, you're not going to convince people that Palestine will be the first Arab or Muslim majority country that treats its Jewish minority well. It's a stretch. The sooner people recognize that these are two national groups, both of them have a right to be there, both of them have very legitimate reasons for why they're there, and neither of them are going away. And which is why I just think it makes much more sense to learn that that what needs to be done is to find ways that can push these two groups, or like can make sure these two groups can actually live, Israelis in their place and Palestinians in theirs, and they can have like, maybe one day there'll be softer borders or immigration and things like that, but they kind of need their states first, right?
Yeah, I mean, ultimately that was my driving point, was like, you need Palestinian self-determination, and Israel has a right to secure its borders. And without both of those things, like whatever solution there is needs to take both those things into account. Otherwise, there's always going to be a conflict. The biggest thing for me that I want people to understand is like basically the exodus of Jews out of Arab countries after 1948, which Hassan he says that entire notion is just propaganda, it's racism, it's lies. And I really don't even know what to say about that. It's just erasing their entire history. These idiots on the Arab podcast saying that Jews cooking hummus in Israel is cultural genocide. I mean, what kind of psychotic shit is that? But anyway, I think we've explored this quite well, and I appreciate your input on this. I thought it was a very interesting conversation, so I appreciate you sharing your knowledge with us.
Yeah, thanks for letting me yap. I love a good yap.
And that's LonerBox, if you guys want to watch him you stream on YouTube, right, primarily?
Yeah, LonerBox Live on YouTube.
There it is, guys. Thank you, man. I'll talk to you later.
Okay, I appreciate it. Thanks.
Bye-bye.
Okay. Whoa, you guys. Okay. LonerBox more like YapperBox. Yeah, I don't like the I just got very, I'm at peak Hassan. I couldn't do it. I was like, fuck. I'm just gonna take a chance and just yap about what I care about. Fuck knows, man. Woo. Still working on your sleep hygiene? Hell yeah. Well, shit, guys. I think Queeman has wanted to debate me for a while, but we'll see. 3Ds Max, thanks for $5. Temu Hassan on the rise. What? Yeah, true. Morgan Gramsick, thanks for the $9.99. Family, oh, I appreciate that. Glitterbell, thanks for the $10 combined. Please don't validate resignation. This needs to be beaten. True. It's Yaya. Thanks for the $9.99. Can you please encourage the audience to take action in helping Gaza in Israel or otherwise with the aid block? Yeah. I think honestly, the only thing you can do now is befriend an Israeli and make them protest. I don't know. Fucking bully them. They love being bullied. If you're an Israeli right now, and I can tell you're there because you're giving me fucking shekels. If you guys aren't joining the protests at this point, then you're kind of a cunt. Sorry. Whoops. Calimac, thanks for the £20. Sorry, is there a deeper reason far leftists don't support Ukraine other than campism, or thinking Russians aren't as brutal as evil as the IDF? How can people like Varoufakis make statements like?
In the box, 8 points in Scrabble.
Hey, thanks for $10. Imagine Varoufakis saying statements like, "Imagine if Russia bombed hospitals." Yeah, imagine if Russia would do that. That's fucking. Why do people have to do this stupid competition as well? Like, imagine if Russia targeted civilians. That's crazy, chat. I could never happen. Not even a thing. Absolute proof. Thanks for the $5. I have a somewhat longer question, but not sure. Oh yeah, I got that one already. I'll have a look at that. As an Israeli, I won't join the protest until Hamas surrendered its weapons and releases its hostages. Sorry. Listen, Gilad, I'm sure you've seen some shit, okay? I'm sure you're fucking wired. I'm just saying. Takes a lot of courage to stand up for your enemies, okay? You're very brave standing up to Hamas. But it takes a lot more courage to stand up to your friends, okay? You can criticize the other side all. The last thing Palestinians need, okay, ever, is a fucking Israeli dude, right? Being like, listen here, chum, let me tell you what's what about the conflict, the thing. Personal response, like, mate, you might as well just fucking scream at like the shit that you left in your toilet, your fucking floater, okay? You might as well be screaming at your own skid marks. Like, what the fuck? Like, just find the closest wall and just go stare at it and say things to it and give it a talking to. Like, what the fuck? You can, however, convince your own. You didn't stand up to Steven. You can beat him up now, but you didn't press him. Okay, excuse me. I'll go to Florida and have me a good fucking gnome for breakfast. What? Palestine has Hassan as their spokesman. They don't need more enemies. Yeah, right? Ugh.